Nintendo's M-rated platformer, Conker's Bad Fur Day. Conker. Alright, let's watch this. Let's go to watch.
When you think of Nintendo, you think of well-made, colorful, mostly family-friendly fun, right? But just once, that was far, far from the case. Let's set the scene. The year is 2001. We're coming up on the end of the Nintendo 64 generation.
Yep.
The PlayStation 2 came out a year before, and the GameCube is slated to release later that year in September.
Nintendo GameCube.
But there were a few games Nintendo still had left, and one big one. One game Nintendo poured a decent bit of change into. One game that had a studio behind it that were known for quality. That studio being Rare.
Okay.
Rareware, for those who don't know, were kings of AAA games back in the 90s. Rare were a second-party developer for Nintendo, responsible for so many classic games. Banjo-Kazooie, GoldenEye, Perfect Dark, Killer Instinct. These guys were so good, Nintendo trusted them to make all 3 Donkey Kong Country games, Diddy Kong Racing and Donkey Kong 64. And if you know Nintendo, they don't really like collaborating with anyone.
Excuse me, I'm Eric Lensher.
Sounds Xavier.
Go fuck yourself.
Anyway, where was I? Right, so Rare had a character named Conker. Conker was first featured in Diddy Kong Racing in 1997, a family-friendly racing game starring the popular DK sidekick. His first solo outing was Conker's Pocket Tales on the Game Boy in 1999. Another cutesy, kid-friendly Rare outing. Nothing special, the game received average reviews, but it isn't fondly remembered today. So, as the age of the 64 is coming to a close, releases are starting to slow down. But Rare has one more game, slated for release in March.
He's gotta change now.
Conker's Bad Fur Day, yet another 3D platformer, because the 64 was definitely missing platformers. So what makes this one special? Well, at E3 2000, Nintendo had an entire booth dedicated to Conker. But this was a little unusual. You had to have ID to get let in. And there was an open bar, which gave out free beer, and custom beer mugs, and condoms? What the fuck? Development for Conker dates back to 1996. The first sighting of the guy was in 1997. An E3 trailer was shown for Conker's Quest. This was set to be Rare's first platformer on the N64. Yeah, before Banjo-Kazooie and Donkey Kong 64. Rare's Killer Instinct team were the minds behind it, so obviously they're gonna have a ton of blood and guts, right? No, the team apparently wanted a break from all the violence, which I'm sure they wouldn't change their minds on at any point later down the road. The game looked like a Disney cartoon come to life, like a video game Chip and Dale. Alongside our boy Conker was his girlfriend Berry as a playable character. Conker was set to release around December of 1997, but was pushed back for Diddy Kong Racing. In 1998, it was renamed to 12 Tales Conker 64, with an October 1998 release date. And you know what? It got delayed again, back to the gulag for you.
I'm going to the gulag.
At this point, Mario 64 and Banjo-Kazooie had already released on the 64, along with titles like Rayman 2 and Glover. The console really didn't need another E for everyone platformer. Chris Seaver took the reins at Conker's development. Thanks to this guy, Conker was the same animal, but a different beast.
What the f does that mean, Kobe Bryant?
Chris came in with some fresh ideas.
You're welcome.
They were making this level where Conker needed to collect a honey hive.
What can we do with that? Oh, I know. Make it violent.
He presented this idea and his work to the Rare higher-ups, and they loved it. So from that point on, the boulder was set in motion. Conker's marketing was something else. Nintendo refused to advertise this game in their magazine Nintendo Power, so took to another well-known publication, Playboy. The Nintendo name was noticeably absent from the marketing. Not sure why. Promotional booklets were handed out to college students during spring break, along with shirts, temporary tattoos, and those condoms again. There was also a commercial that aired on late night TV. I'm not going to show all of it here because I don't think YouTube would appreciate it, but you can look it up.
A hangover's never pretty. But a squirrel with a hangover, that's just obscene.
Oh, wow.
Conker's Bad Fur Day. Rated M for mature.
This is a Nintendo game, by the way. The game did not see a Japanese release, and it's unknown as to exactly why. For my money, I'd guess the amount of references to Western pop culture wouldn't have translated. But again, this is just me guessing. Nintendo of Europe refused to publish the game themselves, and so it was published by THQ over there. In Australia, they wanted to make sure consumers knew the game was mature, as on the box, the age rating looked like it was mid-fall down a flight of stairs. So why were Nintendo so cautious about this game? They clearly believed in it enough to greenlight the project and fund all this marketing. But when you take a look at the game, you can understand where they're coming from.
Conker's had a bad night. Well, actually, he's had a very good night.
You so big at
Oh.
fancy going for a bounce?
This fat ass bitch off from my back. How about some scat, you little twat?
The game still stars Conker as you make your way through several different worlds, including a castle, a war zone, a rock person nightclub, and a mountain. You use these context-sensitive B buttons to gain new abilities or items. It could be pills that sober Conker up, give him a slingshot, or a roll of toilet paper. The story really isn't all too important.
This is
but
crazy.
Basically, Conker
This is
gets
actually literally insane.
drunk on a night out and calls his girlfriend Berry. Hey, what did happen to Conker's girlfriend?
That is the last time he stands me up.
I'm gonna need that.
Conker calls Barry, says he can't come over and he's just going home. Conker, being pissed, gets lost on the walk home and has to find a way to get back. He helps a few people along the way, battles some bosses, gets involved with the mob, storms the beaches of Normandy, becomes a bat, helps out Death, shoots some zombies, typical stuff. There's also the Panther King, who wants to capture Conker so he can fix a leg on his table, as Conker is the perfect height for the missing table leg. The game's lighting was praised at the time for how dynamic it was, which you can really see in places like the nightclub. The game's cutscenes have full voice acting and animation, which is very impressive considering the N64 cartridge could only hold 64 megabytes on it.
Yeah.
It's that bloody squirrel. Quick, into character!
The soundtrack also is excellent, featuring songs that are guaranteed to get stuck in your head. The controls can be
Terrible.
especially when using the 3-prong probe device. It's mostly a smooth experience though. I played on the Rare Replay Xbox port, which is the version I would recommend. Conker controls pretty well. He's very floaty, which can sometimes make jumps a bit difficult to gauge how far you're going, but because he's a squirrel, he uses the iconic squirrel ability to spin his tail around and hover, which makes it a bit more forgiving. Some shooting controls can be horrendous, however. I haven't played the game on the OG 64 controller because, let's face it, I'm not paying this much to play an original copy of this game, but when you pull a gun out, the controls swap over to this tank mode where you use the right stick to strafe and the left stick to move both Conker and aim. This is particularly annoying in the escape sequence towards the end of the game, where dodging these lasers takes surgeon-like precision, so combine the precise platforming with floaty physics, weird controls, and in a tight space and a countdown timer, it's a recipe for pure rage. This game can be hard, and I'm not talking about King B. Since this game was for older audiences, Rare upped the difficulty. Whilst it's not Super Meat Boy hard, I'd put it on the same tier as maybe the first Crash Bandicoot. Some stuff feels genuinely unfair, and a few deaths just felt cheap. But stuff like the hoverboard race was a really fun challenge, so if you're looking for a casual yet challenging experience, I would highly recommend the game. It's very short, with my playtime being around 7 to 8 hours, which is even over what I reckon it would take. I think the game benefits from the shorter runtime though, as the environments and stages are more memorable and stand out from one another. The game looks pretty amazing. Obviously the Rare Replay version has sharper textures than the N64 original, but you could really tell that Rare knew how to push the hardware to its limits back in the day. Now, as I said before, basically every stage is pretty memorable, but to save time, I'll just quickly go through some of my favorites. Of course, there's the iconic Great Almighty Pooh. This boss is probably the most well-known, or infamous, I guess, Bettingly straight. The game giving an opera performance for the ages.
From my chocolate starfish. How about some scat, you little twat?
The Saving Private Ryan stage plays it concerningly straight. The game, which is normally full of jokes, has a parody of the gruesome beach storming scene from the classic war movie. Instead of those guys from World War II that I'm not allowed to mention, we have German teddies that keep up the tradition of committing war crimes. My favorite stage though is the last one. You start with a parody of the Matrix lobby scene with both Conker and Barry dressed in full black leather. The context-sensitive button sends you into a bullet time before reaching the end where it's revealed the mob boss was working for the Panther King. Barry gets shot all before a xenomorph from Alien bursts out of the Panther King and you have to hurl it into the airlock Mario 64 style while wearing the mech suit from Aliens. All before the game crashes.
Hello.
Conker talks to the programmer and gets a choice of his weapon to kill the alien. As the old king is dead, he is now crowned King Conker. Reality soon dawns on Conker though. Sadly, he forgot to ask the programmer for the one thing that he wanted, his girlfriend Berry back. With his girlfriend gone, he makes his way to the pub again. after exiting, he stumbles off just like at the start of the game.
Let's do that tonight.
This time in the other direction. Nintendo, surprisingly, just kind of let Rare run. They allowed Rare to put almost anything in the game, with two main exceptions. First was a reference to Pokemon, which has actually been hacked back into the game. The second was, slightly different. Nintendo refused to, allegedly, let multiple KKK jokes be included.
KKK? That's not good.
There has been some criticism of the game's references being outdated, which I'd say is a weak argument. The game is older than me, and I still found them very charming. Movies like Saving Private Ryan, The Matrix, Jaws, and Alien are timeless classics, so the references don't feel all too dated. Upon the game's release, a chain of stores in America, KB Toys, refused to stock the game when it came out. Despite this, the game received overwhelmingly positive critical reviews. This was amongst a sea of bad publicity sparked up by angry parents buying this game for their children. One parent compared
There's
Nintendo
always going to be angry parents. Always.
releasing this game to Disney releasing porn, which I think is a tad excessive. These same parents, which I assume lack the basic ability to read. So what happened to Conker? Well, the game initially sold poorly. It was a flop, especially off the back of DK64 and the Banjo series, which sold exceptionally well. It's far from difficult to see why though. The PS2 launched a year prior, and the game came out a few months before the GameCube was going to release. It wasn't marketed in Nintendo Power, which at the time was one of the main ways people found out about games. It was a mature game on a console popular with younger audiences, and mature gamers had mostly gravitated towards PlayStation. However, since its release, the game has grown a cult following for its unique sense of humor and pretty good gameplay. Conker's other bad day was in its early planning stages after this game's release, until Nintendo sold Rareware to Microsoft in September of 2002.
See you, chump.
What the hell?
From then on, Conker saw a remake released for the Xbox in 2005. He featured in the now defunct Microsoft game creator Project Spark.
Without a new game.
I've been waiting for you to come home, baby.
Guess we'll have to make our own.
He was also in this Sin Against God. This was an augmented reality game in development for Microsoft's HoloLens. Just listen to what this guy says at the very start of this trailer.
Conker's a much beloved property that has a huge following.
If he's that loved, why would you do this? Why Conker? Why him? I and many others would love to see Conker return. But with many of the original staff at Rare being gone and Microsoft showing no interest, in fact you could argue negative interest, I'm afraid Conker's Bad Fur Day was also his last.
Well, we live in hope.
Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed.
It's from a Donkey Kong game.
So ends another incident in my day.
It's a Nintendo character, technically.